This session will deal with some of the tools found in CCDAutoPilot version 5. Some are new, some have been enhanced from prior versions. Let's look at the first one, which I call the Automation Assistant. Anyone who has ever done anything with automation knows that there are a lot of things that can go wrong until you learn how your system works and get your workflow well established. I've put in CCDAutoPilot 5 a number of lines of code, frankly, of software, to try to prevent that from happening. And the best way to show how that works is to do some incorrect settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect from my hardware for a minute. I'm going to disconnect my focuser. Okay, I'm going to link to my software. And then I'm going to go into the guiding window, and I'm not going to select any dithering. And I'll go into the focus window, and I won't select any focusing. And I'll go into the session window and accidentally set the date for a couple days in the future. So maybe April Fool's Day. And I'll update that. And let's say I missed those settings. So I go to my Run Session tab, and CCDAutoPilot will come up with a number of warnings at the top. And this is the Automation Assistant area. For example, it says focusing is specified during the session, but there's no focuser connected. I disconnected it. The dithering is disabled. That might be a problem. And the target start time is well after astronomical dawn and won't be acquired tonight. So now I can go back and fix some of those. So I'll start with the date, and I'll make that today's date. Save that. And I'll go to guiding, and I'll put my dithering on for enhanced and take the suggested amount by clicking on the suggest button. And I'll go check how I'm doing at this point. Go back to the Run tab and see, oh, I still haven't enabled focusing. So we'll go back to the setup, and sure enough, focuser is set to none. We'll now set it to focus max, and the CCDAutoPilot will link to all the software. You can see the progress, by the way, in the lower left corner, and what takes some time to link and so on, but you can see it's moving along. With the, I hope with the Automation Assistant to make your automated sessions a lot more reliable. And even though we know with concurrent editing that we can make changes along the way, it's nice to get it set up correctly at first. And sure enough, if we look at the Run Session tab now, we'll see that probably the only warning we have, we have an early start time, so it's going to be acquired as soon as possible, and no focusing mode is suggested, or is selected. So let's go get that focusing mode set up. And sure enough, I want to use Sky Star, my nice off-target focusing routine. I see that my target start time is before astronomical dusk. Let me go back to the session page and see when astronomical dusk is. And sure enough, it's 8:04, so we'll change it, make it 05, and we'll go check our warnings one more time. And now we're clear, so we've done everything at least that can be thought of at the moment to begin to run our session with a higher probability of success. A handy calculator to allow you to determine what is an optimal subexposure, which is a function of a lot of technical things such as read noise, sky glow, dark current, amongst others, is the subexposure calculator. It provides you with a mechanism to measure your camera, both in gain and read noise. Having done that, you can then measure your sky glow by selecting a test exposure, binning, and filter, and hitting the measure sky flux, and CCDAutoPilot will calculate your sky flux in electrons per second. Having characterized my camera on the left side, I can now analyze the results of that characterization. What this indicates is for my read noise to only contribute 5% of my total noise with my sky flux, I have need a minimum subexposure of 180 seconds. However, my planned subexposure is 600 seconds, so what I can do is I can see how low my read noise is suppressed at that exposure level. And you can see it's about 1.5%. If I operate my sensor at minus 40 degrees C, I'll allow my dark noise contribution to be 1%. And if I have 6 frames in my stack, then and they're dithered, then I only need 4 frames, min-max clip combined. That's a very low number of darks. However, if I don't dither, now I need a lot more frames, and as my stack size goes up, I need more and more dark frames to keep the dark current down to 1%. If I wanted to keep it at 0.5%, I need 42. It's getting ridiculous. However, by dithering, we get a very modest 5. If we look at a popular sensor, the 11,000, you can get a feel for the same kind of thing. Now here, because it typically has a higher dark current, you're going to need, and you're not going to be able to run at -40 because of the nature of the chip, you would need more dark frames. So with this calculator, you can experiment with different sensors, with different temperature operation. Like, for example, if I run warmer, you can see I need more dark current. As I continue to warm it up, the number of dark frames increases dramatically. This is all based on manufacturers' nominal data, which you could have a sensor at either end off of nominal. So this gives you some ideas on how to plan your sub-exposure to minimize noise, which is what astronomical imaging is all about. On the same page, we have a guide calculator, which basically suggests min and max moves for your guider so that you don't chase seeing and you're not driven crazy off the guide chip by a cosmic ray or some other transitory event. So for my camera, for example, my pixel size is about 0.65. If I hit the suggest button, it'll say I should have my maximum allowable peak-to-peak error of 0.5, my maximum allowable movement of 1.5 arc seconds, and therefore the min and max moves are shown here. If I hit this button, I will apply it to my, in this case, CCDSoft direct guide. This will change depending on your camera control program, whether you're using relays or direct guide or micro guide. But it's a way to set your min and max move, and you should really do that. This is very important for good guiding. Another handy utility added in CCDAutoPilot V is the log examiner. During the course of a session, many detailed activities are kept and written to a log for both analysis afterwards and also troubleshooting. The log examiner gives a facility to search out things that may be of interest. Let's open a log from a recent session. I'll take last night's session, for example. Opening the log, we have the normal amount of detail that goes on and on and on and on. But suppose we were curious to see, knowing that the system was focusing during the night, we could look for the logs and find some phrase that might relate to focusing. There's one that would be of interest, focus position. So let's search for focus position, and we don't need to get all the letters, and hit search. And we can quickly see how our focus changed and the temperature changed during the course of the evening. Now, suppose we wanted to get some information about each exposure. We can reload the log so that we can easily look for things. And so here's where a typical exposure will have a file name, word exposing, a file name, weather, and download. So let's search for exposing ... And now let's add the 3 lines after and search again. And here we have a nice grouping showing every exposure and what the weather conditions were, what our download times were, and so on like that. If we just wanted to find out how our download times are behaving, we can search on download time, and there we see all of our download times, and of course what the cooler was doing and so on. Hopefully this utility is limited only by your imagination and what kind of information you'd like to look up. You can save the search by hitting the Save Search button. The most recent 10 searches are saved in the search window. So again, a handy utility for finding out what's going on from exposure to exposure and from event to event. This concludes the tools section of our CCDAutoPilot V has the capability to measure the RGB combined ratios, commonly called the G2V ratios, from a suitable star. A suitable star is one that has a spectral signature similar to our own sun. In order to measure the G2V ratio, we first begin by connecting to all our equipment as I've shown here. Now we'll move to the settings page and select the tab for wizards. The G2V calibration is shown along with the last entered data. Because we're connected to the sky, the auto star select is enabled, which will allow the sky's database to be searched for up to 5 suitable stars. We begin by hitting the measure button, confirming that we want to replace the current ratio. And if you look at the bottom, the sky is finding suitable G2 class stars. It's found one, it's slewing to the first star. It does a plate solve to make sure that the star is centered on the sensor, makes a correcting slew, and now begins to take light frame. At this point we're using SAO 65024, and this is logged in the side settings panel over here. It's a good idea to keep your camera control program in view because you will need at some point to confirm that the star is isolated. In this case, we can see that the star is in fact by itself, so we can go on with our measurement. Unfortunately, this can't be done automatically because the ability to discriminate between a close double is currently beyond software capability anyhow, so that's why you have to be involved. But once you've made the decision that it's acceptable, the rest of the operation is automatic. CCDAutoPilot takes a number of measurements through each filter after having set the exposure to a desired level. This is an integrated flux measurement. It is not a simple peak value. This leads to more accurate data. So our measurement is completed, and we see our flux levels for the various filters, and then they're extinction corrected. Now, since our altitude is pretty close to the zenith, there's not a lot of correction underway. It's the measurement of one star and illustrates the operation of the G2V calculator. It's always a good idea to combine multiple measurements with more than one star so that you can check out and remove any outlying data. There's a second session underway here, and we're going to stop after this one completes. You can either save the log data to Notepad just by clicking on yes. If you say no, the information in the log is saved on the Windows clipboard and can be used to paste that information into another program. A program called EditPad Pro, just by using Control-V to have the data appear in this window. This completes the session on tools.